Ever since I heard about the digicam craze, I've been really interested in creating what some creators have called the dreamy film-like look in my photography and video content. It's a style of photography often seen in the work of creators like Evan Ramft, Peter McKinnon, and Jonathan Paragus. But there's been a gap in my ability to achieve this film-like aesthetic. And part of that gap has been in the post-processing tools I've been using, many of which have been free or lower cost tools that weren't designed to achieve the film-like effect. That's why I was so pleased to have the chance to try out a software called Dehancer, which was specifically designed to achieve this effect. And in this video, we're going to talk about what it is, what its capabilities are, and what else I'd like to see as the team continues to evolve this product. And what we're going to do is put the app through its paces, testing it using different pieces of equipment, and doing so under a range of different conditions. So if that sounds good, let's get into it. Let's start with a little bit about the app itself and the team behind it. Dehancer is a film emulation software created by enthusiasts and scientists with over 30 years of analog experience. The software is available through multiple formats, including DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut, and Adobe plugins. There's also an online version which operates through your browser, and the version tested here for this video, which is a photo and video editor available as an iOS app. And so to test different devices, I would transfer files from the device to the app using my Amazon Photos account. And I did that because I really wanted to mirror real-world conditions where we're often using different devices, sometimes multiple devices, to capture our photography and video. And I can tell you the team behind this software has put years of research and development into the product, going all the way back to 2014. The team that's developed this includes experts in digital and analog photography and film, data science, mobile application development, user experience design, as well as software engineering and marketing. Everybody needs marketing. So now that we know a little bit about the app and the team behind it, let's head out for our field test. Okay, heading out, we got our coffee, we're all set to go. Today I'm going to try and grab some additional photos and videos that we can use for editing, and I'm looking for photos and videos that have a little bit of a retro vibe or feel. I'm going to add some B-roll to my B-roll collection. Let's see what we can do. So just coming right out of town here, I was greeted by this sunrise here, and I captured this dash cam style footage with my DJI action cam. And I thought it would be a good use case to see if we could make this footage more film-like using Dehancer. So let's pop into the app for a second so I can show you how I did this. First, scrolling through the different presets, I picked one that I thought had a good color profile. So I picked the Orwo Chrome UT21 1992. Next, I went into Edit and selected the Super 35 setting. And I adjusted for both the bloom and the halation, which is light dispersion on the boundaries of contrasting image areas, and the red-orange halos around bright light sources like the sun. And then I adjusted the film breadth, which is the accidental changes in exposure, contrast, and color that happens from frame to frame as a film moves. And this really helps to simulate that analog feeling. The same goes for gate weave, which mimics the mechanical swinging of a film strip as it's being pulled through a film camera or projection device. And the last thing I added was the gate type and shape using the Overscan tool. That adds the film strip effect at the sides. Not necessary, but I thought it was kind of cool. Now let's compare the final result of these two pieces of footage. So in the split screen here, you can see how the top footage from the DJI Action Cam looks a lot more digital, whereas the Dehancer edit looks a lot more like it's come out of a film camera. Especially as you can see some of the simulated grain and film damage in the sky and along the side of the trees here. Continuing on my journey, I turned down Highway 27 towards Cookstown. And I found what I thought was a shot that had some really good potential. Right at the railway track, there was the sun coming over the tracks, so I got a couple of photos, including a low perspective shot. Now, as it turns out, I wasn't sure if I was truly happy with this one because it is an image shot straight into the sun with a point-and-shoot camera, so there are areas that are kind of darkened and the sky's a little washed out. But then I thought, I was going to edit it anyways because I wanted this to mirror real-world conditions, and as photographers, we don't always get it right in the field. Sometimes we're going to bring a photo back and we're going to hope that our editing software can help us save the shot.
So here in the app, I started with the Fujichrome Velvia 100 as the preset. Then I scrolled over to film and I used the push-pull feature to increase the exposure level. Next I went over to print and I also did a little bit of exposure compensation there as well. Just enough to make some of those foreground elements at least visible. And so looking at the before and after here, we can see that the after shot does look a lot more like a film print. And to me, it actually seems a more true representation of the colors that day. But before we make it down to Cookstown, I wanted to share with you one more image that I think is an even better representation of that dreamy pastel look that I've been going for. So this was a photo I got driving home from work last winter, and I wanted to see what I could do with it using Dehancer. So there's actually 3 quick things that I want to show you with this edit. The first is that under print, I changed the profile from Kodak Glossy to Fujifilm to give it a cooler look. The second is under film grain, you can actually change the camera profile. So I changed that to 35mm with ISO 500, add a little bit of grain to the image, and then with the Overscan tool you can change the photo to add film gates to make it look like a movie film. And so you can see in the before and after these are quite different images, and I think in that second one that's about as close as I can get to the dreamy pastel look. Okay, then let's continue on down to Cookstown.
So B-roll destination number 1 is the clock store over here, and I tend to do a lot of content creation about efficiency. So good metaphor for B-roll footage might be me walking up to the clock store.
Alright, so here we go. I'm going to set up the DJI Action Cam and see what we can do. I ultimately just set my mini tripod into this flower pot here and had it aimed up the street so it could capture B-roll of me walking around, looking at the clocks. I don't know, like I said, it's a metaphor. Okay, so for this edit, what I decided to do was use a simple preset because I think part of the value of these apps is that they should make things more simple for us, save us time, improve our workflow, that kind of thing. What I did in the presets here is I just scrolled through and I looked for a preset that was colorful and kind of vintage looking, and ultimately settled on the Fujicolor C200 with the Kodak Endura. And so the only other tweaks I did beyond that was a little exposure compensation, switching to the Super 35 camera settings and adding just a little bit more film damage. It took like a minute in total. And so you can see in the after edit here, there's more contrast in some areas. The colors are richer but also more muted in some cases. And overall it just looks a lot more cinematic. Okay, so for the last stop, I went down to Beaton, Ontario to test the photo editing app under one more set of different conditions.
I kind of like all the green here at the Beaton Lawn Bowling Club, so
let's head on over and see what we can find here. Part of what I liked about this site is the richness of the colors and the fact that I knew at this time of the morning there'd be some good contrast between light and shadow. Ultimately, this was the original image that I got. Again, going into Dehancer, I looked for a good preset that I could work with as a base, and ultimately settled on the Prokudin Gorskly preset. And then I made a few adjustments to exposure under print, changed the profile to Fujifilm, made a few color adjustments, bumping up the green a little, and going with the Super 35 ISO 250 setting. The neat thing with the app is if you tap down, you can see the original image, so you can see how it's changed. And that's really useful if you want to quickly compare how your edits looked from your original photo. And I did like the richer, more silvery blue tones I was able to produce with this edit. So after that, back home, I did one final test for the video, and that's to see how it performed under nighttime conditions. I captured some footage of me driving around with some small town city lights in the background. And then what I did in the Dehancer edit was use every single motion picture film setting that I could find, including the Kodak Vision 3 200T in the presets, the Kodak print film in the print settings, and the 65 to 70mm settings in the film grain, halation, and bloom. And I even opted for the widescreen and the gate type. And then after that, I did make just a few more tweaks in Filmora to adjust for how it looked on the big monitor. And I think that's fair because sometimes you are going to make those kind of adjustments when you're going from a mobile app to a large screen format. And I guess this is a good time to mention that the app does also work on the iPad as well as the iPhone. But since I didn't have access to an iPad, I was using my iPhone. And so just a couple of things to point out. You can see here how the halation and the bloom is more defined in the Dehancer edit, and it does have that silvery blue tone that I like when it comes to film production. And the other thing to note here is the greater color saturation and contrast, partly resulting from my tweaks but also embedded in the original. Now let's finish up with my overall assessment of the app. I'm going to start by saying that it's clear to me that there's a lot of knowledge, research and development, and passion that's been put into this product. So everything I say in this section is really in the spirit of trying to help further improve the app so it can get an even wider market among film and video production enthusiasts. Okay, so the first thing I think about for this is who is the iOS app for in terms of the target audience. For example, professional video editors, they're going to be using the plugins for industry standard software like Adobe or DaVinci Resolve. Like, those people aren't filming and editing on their iPhone. That's going to be more for casual enthusiasts like myself who are into digital photography, like the idea of film photography and video, but don't know a lot about it themselves. And so that brings me to my first recommendation, which would be to embed some short video tutorials into the app itself. Now I will say that there's plenty of good articles, quick guides, and tutorials about the different features on the app, including a quick guide on the iOS app that was super helpful. However, my thought is that people who are casual users aren't going to spend a ton of time looking around for that stuff, or reading through it, or watching longer videos. I mean, I did it, but I was motivated to make this video. This is further complicated by the fact that the controls that we see in the app are completely different than what one would see in some of those free tools that I mentioned earlier, things like Snapseed, for example. And that makes perfect sense because the Dehancer app is designed to mimic print photography and film, not for digital editing. And that brings me back to the original point of incorporating, 5 or 6 2 to 3 minute quick tutorials about, what is halation, what is bloom, what is film grain, and how does it affect the editing process that people can do within the app, and embed those right into the app so there's like zero friction for new users learning how to use the tool. And so speaking of reducing friction, there are 2 additional features that I think would be really cool to add to the app. One would be a repair tool, kind of like what exists within Snapseed, which allows you to remove unwanted objects from photos. Now I know the idea here is to create authentic style print images, but if you think about the aesthetic that a lot of digital photographers who create this type of photography are going for, it's a retro image, but it's kind of a cleaned up and perfected retro style image. So a repair tool would just help people to do that more efficiently without ever having to leave the app. The other thing would be a framing tool, again like in Snapseed, which allows you to add a print-like frame to a digital image. As you saw with the Overscan feature before, this exists for film-like frames, but there's nothing for photo-type frames that I saw within the app. And again, this is just about making the workflow more efficient by not having to switch to another app. Okay, so the last recommendation here is more of a marketing suggestion related to the presets. The presets, I see they're mostly based on print film profiles, which makes total sense because it's a print film emulator. However, if we think about expanding the total addressable market for the app, then you have to think about the fact that many digital photographers who like film photography know about film photography through the lens of film cameras that they know about. So if you tell me that the app produces images that look like the Kodak Gold 200, I'll be like, okay. But if you tell me that the app can help produce images that looks like it came out of a Leica film camera, then I'm going to say, I want that app. So my thought would be to combine a few camera presets with some film print presets so that can be kind of a gateway to get people into the app because they've heard about those cameras before. But all in all, I just want to conclude by saying this is a really cool app. It's definitely worth checking out. And if you want to check it out, you can sign up with the link in my description. And if you use the code MyTogBlog, you get a 10% discount on that. I really did enjoy using it, and I learned a lot about print, film, and photography that I didn't know before. So if you're into that, it's worth spending some time with the app and the tutorials and documentation for that alone. And if you're a brand that's watching this and you're interested in having me review one of your products, do reach out via my podcast page. I'm always open to a conversation about that. And until next time, we'll see you in the next video.